You're listening to Big Blend Radio's English Connection Show with Glynn Burrows, owner of Norfolk Tours. Hi, everyone. It is time for another English Connection show with Glynn. And as you know, not only does he run Norfolk Tours, but he is big on history and family history. And hopefully today we're not touching on any of your family history, or maybe we are. Some of them are cool. We're talking about rebellions. And a lot of this happened in history. Some of it ends up in war. Some of it doesn't. Some of it ends up in positive change. Some of it, let's just say this, violence does not cure violence. Can we just start with that, Glynn? Welcome back.
Hi, yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is very, very, very violent. But as you know, we were talking about just a minute ago, a rebellion does not need to be a violent rebellion. And some of the people were as far away from violence as you could possibly get. They were just doing things quietly in the background. And it turned out that they changed the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do.
And then some took it into violent extremes in history. And this all came about because we're getting close to Guy Fawkes Night, or Bonfire Night in England. Remember the 5th of November. And we've talked about it a lot over the shows over the years. And we're going to talk about that again today, but some other rebellions. And it's sometimes violence comes from doing the good thing, I suppose. And sometimes you have to be a little criminal to get things done. But, I don't want to get arrested at the end of this. Let's start off with Guy Fawkes Night, because this is a British tradition. So if you're over in England on November 5th or the weekends around that, you may see bonfires going on all over the country.
You will, yeah. I mean, this came around really because, people didn't like what was going on with the king and the members of parliament. And, sometimes the parliament is the biggest load of crooks going, so people always like to rebel about these things. Well, in 1605, Guy Fawkes and a whole load of people, and some of them are just behind me in this picture here. They were going to blow up the Houses of Parliament, and they wanted to bring back another monarch because they didn't agree with the monarch and they didn't agree with the Parliament. So they thought, well, how can we do that? We can blow them all up. So he decided that he was going to put a load of gunpowder underneath the Houses of Parliament in London and blow them up. But his secret got let out and he was discovered. And talking about violence that he was going to do, the violence that was done to him was even worse. It wasn't pleasant. But, this is what happens, if they find somebody doing something nasty, then they're going to punish them to stop other people from doing the same thing.
So you celebrate it, though. You do celebrate it in England. And Bonfire Night, when I was there as a kid, it was like people took their old furniture and dumped it in the bonfire kind of thing. Now it seems to be more of a festival kind of atmosphere, right?
Well, the thing is, you see, I mean, when I was young, you were allowed to have fires, you were allowed to have your own fireworks and things. But now with all the new rules and regulations, most firework parties are done by an organization.
Mm-hmm. That's probably a good thing.
Yeah, well, it is. With fireworks, people get hurt. So most of it is well organized with a group. And, it's all organized, insured and everything else as well. But actually, when the Gunpowder Plot was discovered and they did away with all the people who were involved in it, there was actually an Act of Parliament that said that we had to celebrate and we had to have bonfires and fireworks of some sort to celebrate that the Parliament didn't get blown up.
Oh.
So that was actually an Act of Parliament that made us have Bonfire Night. Would you believe?
So basically, they're giving themselves their own bonfire because they didn't get blown up.
Yep, they're saying.
Dude, that's kind of. I'm sorry, but that's. I mean, we do fireworks on the 4th of July for becoming independent from you.
Yeah, well, we can do that. We don't mind that. But we have to have a bonfire. And when I was a kid, again, we used to have a guy on the top of the fire. we would burn Guy Fawkes because he was the criminal, he was the rebel. And Parliament told us that we had to have a fire and burn an effigy on the top of the fire.
Wow.
So that was what we did.
Now, do you think who he wanted in place would have been a better leader?
Who knows?
Yeah,
Who knows?
really.
This is rewriting, isn't it? And as I mentioned in my article, a lot of the rebellions that have taken place, even if they succeed, we find very often that whatever is done to take its place turns out in the end to be very similar to what was before. Because, people who take charge, generally it goes to their heads. There are very few people that don't have an agenda, so that there is always something that actually isn't as we probably hoped it was going to be.
It's never all that you want it to be. It can't be.
No, there's always going to be something.
That's a rule of life, I think, which is interesting. But now I've got David Bowie stuck in my head singing Rebel, Rebel.
That's exactly why I called it Rebel, Rebel.
Yeah, you're just making sure I keep having that song. And this came from our last chat on Ireland. And now Robin Hood. We've talked about Robin Hood before.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think he's real. A lot of people don't know. And then
don't know.
And it's like Zorro in Mexico, right? Zorro came in with his bandito, his little mask over.
Obviously, there used to be a film, didn't there?
Yeah, but there was a real Zorro. I met his great grandson, and he's got a lot of great grandkids, And apparently, so I said, well, look, what did he really go with his horse and do all this stuff? And he goes, no, he was just a person who did kind things like the Robin Hood of Mexico, and people just turned him into this bigger figure doing all kinds of things like Jesse James and all of that in the Wild West. The dime store novels kind of changed up who these people were. They do one thing and it's like, oh, he's the greatest gunslinger across the nation. But really, he just won one fight, which was still incredible or something. But But Robin Hood is kind of in that category, right?
Yeah, Robin Hood, again, like you said, we don't even really know whether Robin Hood existed, but there is the story that goes around that he fought against the Sheriff of Nottingham. He lived in Nottingham Forest, which was a great big hunting ground for the king, for his deer hunting, and he realized that the rich were getting richer and the poor were getting poorer. So he would steal from the rich and distribute to the poor, which is what we'd all love, wouldn't we, really? I mean, that's normal, that's what we all want to see. But, whether it actually happened or not, we don't really know. But there are lots of very good stories about. A good story's a good story. Lots of books have been written about him. A lot of tourism in the Nottingham area are based on Robin Hood. So, it's all good fun. It's a bit like, lots of these things, tourism is going to see these places that are associated, even though you're not really certain whether it actually happened where it did. I mean, like, for instance, this weekend I've been at Runnymede, which is where the Magna Carta was sealed in 1215. And actually they don't know where it happened. They know it happened roughly in the area around Runnymede, but they don't know where. So, people go there and they don't really know where it all happened.
And that actually is part of our Constitution.
It is, yeah. That's what is the basis.
That was the basis of it.
The American Constitution. Yeah, most legal systems in the world are based on the Magna Carta. That's where we get the jury from. To be heard by 12 men, good and true.
So we're going to hope that our legal system, our judicial system, does the right thing.
Well, exactly, because you got 12 people, you're going to be judged by your peers. That's what it says in the Magna Carta, that you're judged by your peers. In theory.
In theory, yes. Everything looks great in theory until you do it. Yes. It goes back to our conversation before this. It is like that. But I think that's in life. You just have to have hope, and no one's perfect. Human beings are not perfect. And
not.
And remember that when we make mistakes, it makes you feel better. You know, it's like, hey, we're not perfect, but we can esteem to be as best we can be. But
Exactly.
Robin Hood, I mean, he really was trying to help the poor.
Exactly. I mean, that was the gist of the story, is that, the poor are deserving and they
Mm.
should be, they should be looked after.
He didn't really do any physical violence, though, from what I remember. Or like if someone attacked, he would attack back or something, right? Or
Yeah, I mean, he used to, on all the films and in all the books and everything, he was a good swordsman, and, he did lots of.
oh, that's right, the sword. How can I forget the sword?
Yeah. But, I
And
mean,
Merlin. Mm,
whether you're getting confused now, but
I
whether
am.
whether it was all good and clean fights, I don't know. But, at the end of the day, you've got somebody who's looking after the poor people, which has to be good. But as I said, like lots of these other things in the dim and distant past, we don't really know whether
Mhm.
he existed at all, or
See,
whether it's
yeah.
just a wish that there was somebody like him.
I always put him with the King Arthur and all of that. That's where I get all confused. And King Arthur, I mean, King Arthur, Robin Hood, Merlin. Merlin is real.
Of course he is.
He is. He is. I wrote
Yeah.
a song about him. He is.
Well, there you go. I mean,
Yeah. So, you
I'm
know,
not gonna argue with anybody who says Merlin is real, or King Arthur, or
yeah.
Robin Hood, or all of these people, then who
You
knows?
never know. I know. William Wallace.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, right.
again,
Now
you've got
he was kind
Braveheart
of,
now, haven't you, on the film,
ugh.
that's what it's all based on, is, Braveheart, who it's
He
all
was
about
like a big soldier. I mean, I wouldn't
Scottish
want to mess with the
nationalism.
Scottish. I would not
No.
mess with the Scottish.
Definitely not. I mean, William Wallace was there for standing up for the Scottish monarchy and to fight against the English, because it's all about that. Edward the First wanted to become leader of Scotland, and William Wallace didn't want that. He wanted Scotland to be Scotland, and that's what it was all about. And actually, Scotland did stay Scotland until 1603, when James the Sixth of Scotland and James the First of England, when we had the unification of Scotland and England, and that was 1603. And remember what happened in 1605. Guy Fawkes wanted to blow up Parliament because he didn't think that James was the rightful King of England.
Oh, see,
So this is all connected to Scotland and England. Again, you see, it comes forward to 1605, when he was blowing up Parliament. English history is
histories.
really, really all intertwined,
We got the rebellions here. Look at the Tea Party thing that we had, the
Exactly.
tea rebellion, where we threw all your bricks of tea overboard. And I mean, we had that when, some of the soldiers dressed up as indigenous people of our country, the Native Americans, and
Right.
it's like, here, we're gonna Mohawk you. It's like we had some interesting things happening over here where um, rebellions can get interesting and very creative. And even when I think about wars like Shaka Zulu and the British, yeah, I mean, that was some rebellion. That was
Well,
rebellious.
it's and as I said in my article as well, generally speaking, the people who are rebelling against what's going on are very often on the side of right. You know, they're
Hmm.
standing up for what's actually right, and it's how they do it. Sometimes they do it peacefully, and sometimes they don't do it peacefully. But what happens back to them is often really extreme. Like I said with Guy Fawkes. What happened to him and his co-conspirators was extreme because of what he did, or what he tried to do. So they had to show people that we're not going to stand for you rebels, even though what he was doing wasn't actually that wrong, because he was just trying to put the right person, as he thought, back as Queen of England, because
Yeah.
he didn't think that the Scottish king should have been the King of England. But
Right.
very often these rebels had a very good reason for doing what they were doing, you know.
And also trying to, now it's a lot of things are protests, and some people call them riots. There's like a whole thing here. Everybody's arguing about who's doing what. And most of the times it's just a protest on something to spread awareness. And that's where we have freedom of speech. And that, see, when things like that get taken away, that's when violence starts to happen, because you're taking human rights away. And the more you start chipping at that, and if there's danger of land being gone, that stuff rebellions can lead to full on wars. I mean,
Exactly.
then you got to think about the hippie movement, peace and love in the 60s when Vietnam was going on. So people have done it in different ways.
Exactly. And they start off peaceful, but when they realize that actually they're not getting anywhere by peaceful protest, very often they then go up to sort of like a rebellion, and then it can easily get to be full out war.
It's emotional. It's emotional if wrong is being done.
Yeah.
Going back to like Guy Fawkes, so you can experience that kind of thing, that history through Bonfire Night and everything. But like when we talk about Robin Hood, and also, I know we're going to talk about Martin Luther, but even William Wallace, this is part of what you do as a tour guide. You can, if I say to you, hey, I want to go where William Wallace fought, you could do that, right? You could take us to these places of where
exactly.
rebellions happened.
Yeah. I mean, the Battle of Stirling Bridge is a place, so you can go to that place. You can go to places. Robin Hood, you can go to Nottingham. You can go to Nottingham Castle, which is famous for the sheriff of Nottingham. But we don't know whether Robin Hood was there. You can go to the forest, the Nottingham Forest, because there is still quite a lot of the forest of Nottingham. And all of these different places you can go to,
Okay, wait. Sherwood Forest is King Arthur then, right?
No, Sherwood Forest is Nottingham Forest.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm trying to get this all.
It's another name for the same thing.
Gee, I don't know why I get confused with things. I don't know. But okay, so then I want to go to Martin Luther, because this is like a important story, and off he gets on his horse, and he was nailing things on church doors, right?
Yeah, I mean, Martin Luther was going on to different churches, and he wanted to reform the church, and he was rebelling peacefully, really. And he was doing the same sort of thing that Henry VIII ended up finishing, which is to break away from the Catholic Church. And because we broke away from the Catholic Church in England as a country, the country completely changed. And, that's why we have got what we've got now with the Church of England, and we've got all of these amazing ruins. And when we visit the ruins that we've got, the ruins of these magnificent monasteries and abbeys and priories and all of these cathedrals that we've got, the fact that a lot of them were demolished is simply down to the fact that we broke away from the Catholic Church. So,
That's sad.
that completely changed what the country was like. Because before that, everything in everyday life was ruled by the church. Your will was proved by the church, that everything went through the church. And the king was, although he was the leader of the country, in lots of ways, the king was sort of below the church, because the church was more important even than the king. But then when Henry VIII decided that he was going to be the king in charge of the church, he was then wearing two hats, and he was bringing in a lot of money. So although a lot of it was to do with breaking away from the Catholic Church, a lot of it was to do with the fact that he wanted to divorce Anne Boleyn. Actually, the main thing that he wanted to do was to take over all the land and all the money that the church had, and all the power that the church had, because the church.
And now we're getting to it.
It's all about power and money.
A lot of rulers like that.
Yeah.
there's a, not personally, but I don't want to. But that is a thing that is a running, it's consistent in history. Power and money, right? And then the followers that kind of suck up to it. There's people that are attracted to it, and they'll get a following of people that just kind of, just because they've got the power and money, think that this is a smart individual, and it's not. And it's just like it, I don't know, they need to put some glasses on or something, but that's what's happened in history, for
And it keeps
years.
happening. Keeps
Yeah.
happening.
I mean, look at Hitler, that
Exactly.
was, so Mussolini and all of those. I mean, I could go on. Idi Amin, there's so
Yeah.
many rulers that once they get hold of that power, and most of the times they do it through bullying in some form, they get in there and there it is. So now Martin Luther, though, I always thought he was connected to the Lutheran Church,
Yeah.
and that
Well,
changed, right? Then that
that
went to
all, yeah. I mean,
later.
Luther was in Europe for most of the situation that he was dealing with. But at the same sort of time, you see, you've got Henry VIII. So the Catholic Church seems to me, from what I've read about it, had the attack on two fronts. So they had the attack from the Lutherans, and they had the attack from Henry VIII at the same sort of time. So that was all bubbling up in the same period. So it does seem that there was a lot going on, and Henry VIII, I think, sort of more or less jumped on a bandwagon.
Because a lot of rebellions and wars come from religion, but a lot of that is tied to the power, right? And the money
Yeah.
and everything that happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Woo. Are we going to get in trouble for this podcast? Who knows?
Don't know.
I don't know. Someone may just say, hey, no, but, I wanted to go back to one of our favorite ladies, Boudicca. Am I saying her name right? Boudicca?
I call her Boudicca.
Boudicca, because you do mention her in here a little bit, because
Yeah, I mean, I didn't just mention
she,
her, but we've discussed her quite a lot, so I thought I won't go mad on Boudicca again. But yes, I mean, she was a rebel standing up for her own people.
and she was real, but people still
Oh, yes.
question different things. She was real, and she truly was like one of the first female warriors we can discuss in history
I mean,
that we know of,
she
right?
was a leader of a tribe in Britain at the time of the Romans, and the Romans sort of wanted to get her tribe to work with them, and she wanted to sort of, from what I can understand, and again, we're talking about 2000 years ago, so from what I can sort of gather, it seems that to start off with they worked quite nicely together, until she realized probably that her people were going to be downtrodden a bit more by the Romans than she wanted. That she thought they were coming in on a par, let's work together on this, shall we? And actually, it turned out that they weren't being completely honest.
They killed her husband, didn't they?
Yeah, and they done lots of nasty things.
And they put people's heads on poles once they killed them and stuff.
Yeah, well, this is what happened years ago. They did that to Guy Fawkes as well.
Well,
And
really?
yeah,
Stuck his head on a pole too?
yeah, why not? Yeah.
See, but this is the thing. We still have these power hungry elements in society and around the world. This is a global thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not being as barbaric as we were back then, but
Yeah.
we're still having that power of greed, and we have barbaric stuff happening in different ways.
Yeah.
And it's just, we're different in a different society kind of thing, but it doesn't
Yeah.
mean barbaric stuff doesn't happen.
No,
is my
no,
point.
I mean, the same sorts of things are going on. I mean, without politicizing things, you don't have to look far around the world to find that
Oh my gosh, no.
awful, awful things are going around the world now. And, it's just ridiculous that we're
Well,
still doing it.
and I'm glad we're having this conversation, because it it's the horrible side of history, and a lot of times people don't want to look at it, and some people in places eliminate it. And I think that's a really dishonorable thing to do. I think we should see
I
history, the good, the bad, the ugly, so that we can learn from it and move forward and go, okay, we've got to make amends. We got to better things. We'll go to Rosa
I think
Parks, right?
I think
She's a
that
perfect
that
one,
I mean,
you
I
know?
think the biggest amends we can make to people is to not do it again.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I can't apologize to Rosa Parks for what happened to her, but I can make sure that I don't do that today.
And teach kids not to and
Well,
to
exactly.
Rosa Parks. I was shocked when you put it in because you're always in England side, right? But you
Yeah.
brought up Rosa Parks actually interviewed a lady that she lived with at the end of her life and wrote a book. And she wrote the book that Rosa Parks had all these life lessons for people.
Mm.
And she was big on education and she was peaceful and she really her of course we've got Martin Luther King
Yeah.
connected,
Yeah.
right? And they were very peaceful and they got attacked for being peaceful. But she stood up at the back of the, but she would not stand up. She was like, I don't need to go to the back. I can. She stood up for herself and for everyone.
Yep.
Well, not for everyone, but for Black people and for women, I believe. You get at the back of the bus. It's like no, and you should be able to sit down as a woman. It used to be back in the day, if you were a woman getting on a bus and a man would stand up and let the woman sit down.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Do you
yeah. And
remember
still,
those days, Glynn? How old
well,
are
we
we?
we still we still do that, you know. Well, people of my generation still do that. I always remember we went to London, or the whole family went to London on the train. This is probably heading up. Well, it would be about 7 years ago, 6.5, 7 years ago, because my daughter was pregnant.
Mm.
And we got on the train in London going back to Peterborough, and we were standing because there were no seats. And I got really angry that nobody sat down, nobody stood up to let my daughter sit down because she was pregnant. Because
Wow.
it, it's just ridiculous that people didn't do that. But it's what the world has come into. But yes, my
Even
generation.
a woman should stand up for that. See, to me, like if you're a young, fit person and you see an elder coming on a train or a bus, male or female, it doesn't matter. Let them
Yeah.
sit.
Generally speaking, that's what I was brought up to do.
Me
But,
too. Open
the
doors, you know?
yeah. But I mean, the story of Rosa Parks, the reason I put it in was because, yes, most of the rebels that I wrote about were violent, but she wasn't. She actually was a very big rebel doing what she was doing because she rebelled against the system,
Hmm.
but totally unviolently, totally peacefully.
Hmm.
And the fact that I have heard about her is pretty amazing. That this little woman, I'll just call her a little woman because she was
Hmm.
not important. We'll put it that way. She was not a celebrity. She wasn't, a politician. She was just a little woman who decided to rebel against the situation. And that to me proves the strength of rebellion because she rebelled in a way that she could. As an unimportant little woman, all she could do is say, no, I'm not going to go to the back of the bus. I'm going to sit where I want to sit. And that was so strong
Hmm.
and so amazing that she did that. She was,
And she is important, but yeah,
oh,
in
yeah.
society, just I need to clarify it because I know someone's going to yell at us. In society's mindset and ways back then, they looked down, and that's a sad thing because everyone has a level of importance, right? And so, but that's how our society was back then. It was terrible,
But we need to
Um,
learn. And that is still going on in some places where
yes.
people are second class citizens just because of whatever sector of society they belong to.
Mm. Oh
Whether
yeah.
it be color or race or sexual orientation or whatever it is,
Anything that isn't you
yeah, anything
yourself.
anything that is different to
Yeah.
whatever, you know, people are still segregated in some way, and that is just wrong. We are
And it's
all
in a different, yeah, there's all kinds of ways of how segregation happens. It may not be the signs that we used to have, but
no.
now it's sorry you can't get a loan because we don't want you living in our neighborhood,
Yeah, and,
you know.
that's just not right. But,
Mm,
what can we do to rebel against that? Well, Rosa Parks did what she could do as
mm,
one woman on her own who, just
mm.
decided that she was not gonna go at the back of the bus, I mean, that is so strong.
It is. It's like, we've all got those grandmas somewhere that do
Yeah,
that, right? You don't
yeah,
mess with the grandma. She's been around. She knows. Don't mess with her.
right.
Well, I want to talk, and of course, this Everyone English Connection is also distributed on some of our other Big Blend Radio podcast channels, and of course, Women Making History. This is definitely you had some good ones in here, and I want to talk about Emily Davison. I had not heard of her, Glynn.
Hadn't
This
you? She's very
no,
famous.
this is well, I just haven't. Sorry.
She's a very famous lady. I mean, she was, just another suffragette. And for those of you who don't know about the suffragettes, it was a movement in England, sort of the first 20 years of the last century, where women were fighting for the vote.
Here too.
Um, Right. And Emily Davison was just another one of the suffragettes. And again, she wasn't afraid to stand up for what she believed. And she was arrested on multiple occasions for doing silly things. Some of the things that the suffragettes did were not necessarily violent, but they were not very sensible, so we say. But what Emily Davison did was that she, in 1917, I think it was, she threw herself in front of the king's horse at the
She wanted
Derby,
to be heard.
and she is said that one of
Well,
her
not
friends
her.
said
Yeah.
that they thought that she just wanted to grab the horse, but she fell underneath the horse's legs and was killed. And that was
That's
quite
sad.
a big story because obviously it was the king's horse, number one.
And so now it's like the king killed her, you know?
Well, no, it was obviously very important. The king was there at the time, and it was on film. You've got one of the early newsreels
Wow.
of this actually happening. So it was a big story, and suppose it went another step along the way of letting people know that there were people fighting for women's votes. But actually, women didn't actually get the vote. Although they got the vote partially in 1918, they didn't actually all get the vote, and suffrage for everybody didn't actually come about until 1928, because
Wow.
a lot of men didn't even have the vote. Because this is what always annoys me, is the fact that women didn't have the vote, and we hear about that all the time, but actually men, like my ancestors, they wouldn't have had the vote either until 1928,
Why?
because they didn't own property, and they didn't earn enough money, because there was a hierarchy. So you either had to own property or earn certain amount of money or whatever, but there were rules for you to get the vote. So it weren't normal for everybody to have the vote anyway until 1928.
Mm,
So we hear about women getting the vote, but actually a lot of men didn't have the vote. So it weren't
mm.
actually a sexual thing necessarily. It was all about money and property.
You see, and that's kind of like here, if you're African American, you didn't get a vote. If you were non-white, you didn't get a vote.
Yeah.
you know? And so and I can't remember, there was like it was within a few years of each other, the women and the African Americans getting it. And then, I mean, of any non-white color, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but gosh, I'm just thinking of this could be a whole series on
Well,
rebellions.
exactly.
It really is like so deep because I was even thinking like what was done to the indigenous people, the first people of
Oh,
America I mean, that was just, it is disgusting. And yeah,
criminal.
but look at Wounded Knee, how the Lakota just held their ground and killed and hurt. but held, they just wounded knee at wounded knee and held, they just were like, there's a thing about, there's a difference between dignity and pride.
Yeah.
And pride, you want to be proud of your town, your community. And there's that level. Then there's the pride that comes with the greed and the power, right? And dignity is, it's like pride backed with a foundation of integrity.
Yes.
And authenticity and doing the right thing. And Wounded Knee was one of those. I just get goosebumps, and it's horrible what happened in this country.
Well, it's
And
horrible what happened all over the world.
all over the world, and what's happening now. I mean,
Yeah.
look what's happening in Ukraine. And look what's happened in the Gaza, all of that. It's fantastic that, hostages were released finally right before we recorded this. So who knows, by the time this airs in a week, everyone, things may have changed. That's the way the world is. But yeah, I mean, I think these women often get forgotten, and it's, you stand up and you get in trouble for opening your mouth or falling under a horse, Let's talk about Wat Tyler.
Yeah.
Or is it Wat or what?
No, it's Wat Tyler. I mean, he was.
This is a revolt, yeah.
This is the Peasants Revolt.
Oh my gosh, but wait. Now I've got another David Bowie song in my head, Suffragette City.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you'll have to just stick to Rebel. That's
okay. All right. But anyway, we'll go to Wat Tyler, because this was like a revolt.
Well, again, it was all about poor people, the peasant, because they had low wages and high taxes. And again, I mean, I don't know how many times in history I always see that it's the poor people who pay for everything. And again, this is what was happening in 1381 when the Peasants' Revolt was. Don't forget, at this time, this was around the time of the Black Death. So a lot of people had died. So obviously the country didn't have a huge workforce.
So this was like a sickness that, like yellow fever
plague.
and things like plague. Okay.
The plague, yeah. It was when, a massive number of people died. So the people who were left then had to pick up the bill, obviously, of paying for everything that was going on. So the peasants were getting low wages but high taxes. They just said this isn't fair. And it isn't. You got, again, like I've said later on in my article, your rich people up there and your poor people down here, there they are, and these ones are the ones who are paying for everything. Well, that's just not on.
Paying for everything financially, because they're the ones making everything and harvesting everything and growing everything and cleaning and doing the labor, and having to basically pay for their labor.
And paying taxes on top of all of that, so they're working hard, earning what they're earning, but then they're paying taxes to look after and pay for the things that, there are other people who were rich enough to have paid for them. Anyway, the peasants revolted and marched on London, and they got Richard II to come to the table. And they actually went to Windsor Castle. That's why I sent you the pictures of Windsor Castle.
Uh-huh.
That isn't necessarily the entire castle that they saw, because Windsor Castle has changed over the years. Anyway, they actually got him to agree. And when they went to sign all the paperwork, Wat Tyler sadly got injured. He fell over, or was he pushed? And
little car accident just happened.
He must have walked into a door, and he was taken to hospital where his injuries got worse. So, you don't really want to know. Anyway, with him out of the picture, because he sadly passed away, with a little help from his friend.
Oh, yeah, really? There's another song.
The king then took back his agreement, and all the peasants then went back into the countryside, knowing that they'd lost.
That sucks, though, because your life and this is where immigration happens. Oh boy, now I just opened another
Oh, you've now said that word, haven't you?
I did overall going to get in trouble because, like, if you can't talk to the leaders, you can't make change without getting
No,
killed off. How
no,
do you have hope? I mean, at
you
this
don't.
point, then you become reckless. Then you become, I'll do whatever. Then you do
Exactly.
become violent because you've been pushed to no option.
This is exactly what I said earlier, where a lot of rebellions start off peacefully and then they realize that actually peaceful is no good. People are not listening to peaceful. People will only listen if they get a sword at the back of their neck, you know. So that's what rebellions often turn into.
And then it
Generally
never
speaking,
really changes anything either.
no,
You know,
because generally speaking, the people who are rebelling haven't got the power when it comes to fighting. They haven't got everything that the rich people have got. Generally, I mean, it's like, I mean, I don't know what it's like in America, but in England, to stand for parliament, you need to have money.
that's
Well, you
that's how
know, that means that poor people are not actually going to be represented in parliament. So
welcome to America. We learned it from you then.
when are we going to have the representation of people like me in parliament? You're not. You're going to have people who have got money, and then they're the ones who are going to look after their positions of power. So
Yeah.
they're going to keep the money. And what does that mean? That means I'm going to be working like they did in 1381. I'm going to be working as hard as I possibly can to pay the taxes to keep them where they are.
They
Well,
all
what have
get
we
swayed.
wanted?
Yeah, campaign contributions. Here it comes. Like, oh, and I remember a bill a couple years ago to stop all the politicians who were running the Senate and the House and everything from investing in companies that were investing in them. Very few signed that and have never made it. And
Well,
they're the some of the ones that are the goody two shoes, you know. And I look at it all and go, I mean, it doesn't really matter what party you're in anymore because it's all corrupt, you know, in this way of what we're talking about. And I'm
yeah,
sure there are a few good people in there, but
yeah,
I
yeah,
know
yeah,
a
of course.
really good person that did
Yeah,
start to run and bowed out of it. And it's the same lesson Harvey Milk had in this country when he was running. The only way forward is to make very bad deals. Like you're going to I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. I'll give you money for this. And so none of it is honest. And so that's why our friends stepped down. And I'm like, but we all want those good people in, but it
but they
runs
can't.
so deep.
They can't
Yeah.
get there. But you see, the problem is the system isn't going to change because it's like turkeys voting for Christmas, isn't it? You know, they're not going to change the system because it will do them all out of their cozy little number, you know.
And
So
their expensive fruitcake.
but it's the same situation as happened in 1381. So we haven't learned since 1381, which is a long while ago, and the same things are still happening
On the world.
around it.
Around
Yeah,
the
yeah.
world.
I'm I'm
This
I'm
is
not
yeah.
saying that it's England, it's America, it's anywhere, but everywhere is these things are still happening. The little man or woman has always been fighting for what's right, and they never end up with what's right. They might end up with a different system, but that new system is still just the same as the old system with a different name. And that has what has happened. That's what's been going on ever since 1381. So, you
Well,
know,
here's the thing, everyone. Travel, do what you really love and care about the best you can. Have that extra slice of cake or the extra cheese scone in Glenn's case here because it's a cheese scone for him. He doesn't care that today we're recording on dessert day. Um,
no.
no, he doesn't. But if it's scone day, he's
Yes, have
in.
a different cup of tea.
Yeah, there he is. He's in. But that's why we need to enjoy life and still try to lead with a good example because I think it just takes time. It really does. You
Yeah.
know, it's Um,
it's taken since 1381, and
well, this really could be a nonstop series, but there are some wins, like Rosa Parks. There are some wins. Harriet Tubman's another one, amazing woman from here. There are wins. So I think we've done a good rant. This is a rants, raves, and rock and roll show since we got David Bowie. You put a little Beatles in there. So yeah, I think, rebellions can be good, and it's how it's done. And some wins, I think the more wins we can have, the better. And
the thing is, once there has been a rebellion, at least we then, even if they don't actually succeed, they've rattled the cage, haven't they? They've made people sit up and take notice, which is sometimes all it needs is for the people, the general population of the world or wherever you are, to actually realize that, this probably isn't right, what they're doing.
And remember, people have the power. Patti Smith says so.
Well, exactly. And all it takes is for someone to rattle the cage, and hopefully things will happen. All it takes for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. That's what they say.
Yeah, it's that whole thing about just keeping quiet when something bad happens.
Yep.
That's that whole, yeah. No, I think maybe we come back or whatever happens in the afterlife. I kind of like Jane Goodall's thing about saying, death is her next great adventure. She's got, and sadly she's passed. But look how much she did. Talk about women doing something. She really stood up for animals and changed the course of history for wildlife. She did so much, and for the environment. And I think she, so we can do things. I don't want everyone to be doom and gloom on this.
No.
But the reality is all those little changes just at least make you feel like there's hope and good. I'm a big believer in that.
I always go back to the starfish on the beach, and that is a positive, that the starfish on the beach has to be the way forward, because even if you're just saving one starfish, you're making a difference to that starfish. And that is all we can do. We can just do our own little bit. I remember in the 70s, there was a thing about saving power because of the strikes we had in England, and they told everybody to make sure they turned off their lights when they weren't in the room. And you think, well, what's the point of that? But actually, if everybody turns off their lights, it makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
And that is what it's all about.
Just like it makes a massive difference if you use solar power, which is the cheapest energy we have.
Oops.
Well,
If you've
anyway.
got the sun.
Yes, that's right. If you got the sun. Well, Glynn, I suppose we're talking about Windsor Castle next.
We can indeed, because it was a really nice visit that I had, and I saw where Her Majesty the Queen is buried. So I was pleased to be able to pay my respects to the Queen.
All right, so let's do that next month. Everyone, stay tuned. Glynn is here every month, and then on other shows where we get to talk about more rebellious topics and some fun and some scones too. So everyone, keep up with Glynn at norfolk-tours.co.uk. And if you go to England, you got to call Glynn. If you go to Scotland or Wales, you got to call Glynn. He'll take you to France even. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't mind that.
So long as there's a scone, he'll go. Thanks so much, Glynn.
Thanks a lot. See you later. I'll try not to be too controversial next time.
Hey, by the way, Thomas Paine rules.
He does indeed.
Thank you for joining us for Big Blend Radio's English Connection show with Glynn Burrows, owner of Norfolk Tours. If you're planning a vacation to England or looking up your family history in England, visit norfolk-tours.co.uk to connect with Glynn. Keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.